Video 4, Lecture 2. We were in this slide thinking about the challenges in the research, right? When we're inquiring into religious thought, obviously there's no objective test. How are we researching the individual experience? It's not something observable, it's not something that we can test. How is it therefore that we should approach it? What we are concerned with is the individual responses and significance. We are concerned with discerning the communal responses. We are also very concerned with the text describing beliefs and stories, and discern the communal and individual significance of the rites and institutions in which the adherent participates. The study of religion is no easy task. We can think about the descriptive and historical inquiries, such as the history of the religion, the structure of the religion, and the observable elements of the religion. Certainly part of our story. However, we're not so concerned with normative inquiries. That's not part of our anthropological perspective necessarily. We're not concerned about the truth of religious claims. We're not either concerned with the acceptability of religious values, nor with the normative aspects of the religious doctrines. Very important, our approach is a descriptive and a historical inquiry, not a normative inquiry. Which brings us to make sure we understand the traditional approaches from an anthropological and historical perspective versus the theologian perspective. Basically, the historicity of religions can be applied from these two perspectives. From one perspective, we can think the theologian approaches the historical processes as providential, where it starts from a perspective and a standpoint of faith. The theologian accepts at face value spiritual accounts of events, where it's seeking to validate its own religion in history, many times discrediting other religious claims. On the other hand, from our perspective, the historical approach of religions deals with historical investigation with a scientific approach, considering the evidence, using techniques of historical inquiry, trying to adopt the scientific methods, particularly of being skeptical about everything, and especially skeptical about records of miraculous events. This is a chart that I found to discern exactly what we are trying to approach here. In this chart we have the different religions, the Catholic, the Lutheranism, Calvinism, Anabaptism, and Anglican. In this chart, the objective is not to discredit one or the other, but to provide to their student an explanation of why do they differ from each other in its beliefs. Okay? Now, the idea is to get this type of sample of religious belief across a wider spectrum of religious thought. For example, this other chart, which is also very important to see what is it that we are not doing in this class. In this chart, and I mean, why is this in this chart what we are not doing in this class is because, as you can see in the scientific part, we can already see a very strong bias of opinions. Now, this is the type of anthropologist that Richard Dawkins is famous for being. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Richard Dawkins, but he really enjoys debating religious specialists from particularly Islam. That's not our approach, a debate with a theologian or with a religious specialist. Here in this chart we can see that it is more than anything trying to explain the evidence of science regarding the explanation of our reality. Nonetheless, the lack of seriousness into this chart is portrayed by these blank spaces, where it pertains to the evidence of the Judeo-Christian tradition, the Hindu tradition, the Shinto tradition, the Chinese myth tradition, and I don't know what this means, it's already kind of, we can see a big generalization, and the Norse In all of them, we can see that they are not that interested in actually discerning their creation stories. Anyway, what seems more important to take from the scientific approach is that what we know from the observations of astronomy, math, and physics is that there is much that we don't know. Okay? Therefore, there's no single history of the study of religion, particularly when we take into consideration that there are many cultural traditions in the world that we see today is the result of historical processes, that religion is a universal phenomenon that exists both in ancient times as in the present. And more than anything, I put this image in the back, kind of reflecting the big task of the anthropologist, which is discerning cultural belief systems that are very ancient in a world history that has been usually written by the ones that have won the wars of conquest. This means a big challenge, particularly when we research places such as in the Americas, in Africa, or Australia, or the archipelagos around the world. Okay? Therefore, in the history of the study of religion, we know that has a Western root in the ancient world and in the Middle Ages. It usually attempts to either criticize or defend particular systems. It also tries to interpret religion in harmony with changes in knowledge. Today, our approach is non-judgmental, descriptive, or explanatory of religions. Our attempt is to understand the genesis and function of religion. Okay? And that's why much of what we do and the inquiry in which we approach today the study of these belief systems has its origins in this 19th century. Okay? Now, this is the end of video 4. We'll start in this chart.